Instead of even just outright saying, like, putting them as, like, 6s on the Kinsey scale, you've got a lot of, like, 3s and 4s, and I was kind of wondering if there is, like, a stigma on just outright saying, like, you're bisexual in comics.
Well, I did it, though. I mean, you know, I actually did I straight out said that David Prodigy was bisexual.
Yes, you did.
And I literally stopped the issue and said that. So I would agree with you, there is a general stigma,
yes,
you know. But in this case, in that scene at the end, it was almost like America was kind of sort of prickling Kate's like provinciality, because she was acting surprised and not really quite getting everybody else. And she was, you know, essentially winding her up a bit. And also the homophobic parts of the readers. But it's definitely, I would agree with your point entirely, but...
No, you definitely, like, I enjoyed a lot of the subversion of, like, troops there, not to
Thank you.
discuss.
Great costume.
Yeah. I like it so much. I think we're winding down to our last 5 minutes of the room. We have some lovely souvenirs of this trivia.
Can I ask a question? So one of the things I was talking about with a young relative of mine recently is sort of coming out but refuses to identify is, and I'm just sort of curious, with a show of hands, if you feel like it, I'm curious if you identify as something other than straight. And if other than straight, if you have a label for yourself, gay, bisexual, or otherwise. I'm asking because I'm really fascinated in this discourse about identity and how we choose to label ourselves in hierarchy of identity, particularly when it comes to experience. And so do you see yourself as male first, as female first, as your ethnic background, your religious background, your sexual background? I always find that in discussions about, well, why do I have to label my sexuality? Most people don't have problems labeling anything else. They're like, they kind of accept what they are. But for some reason that, zoning in on that makes them uncomfortable. So my last question is, for those of you who label yourself, as it were, gay, straight, or other, are you comfortable with that? Like, were you like, yeah, I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm whatever. Like, is there comfort, or do you feel still a little awkward about labels? I don't know if you can answer that, parents. Who's okay calling themselves gay, or something? And who would prefer no label at all? Interesting. Okay.
If you were a dinosaur, it would be amazing.
I was gonna
Like, I'm not binary, so for me, male or female, like, I don't know. That's like I have no fucking clue.
Right, and so one of the things I'm always really fascinated about on these panels particularly is where we start, from like the notion of the labels from which we start, and how I'm always wondering if we're even on the same page when it comes to what we're identifying, what we're talking about. And I think some are, some aren't. I think my experience is that younger people are far more comfortable without like sort of labels or living in a binary world than older people. There's also the politics of labeling, which are different than sort of, you know, the experience. Like, I would say I'm gay not simply because of my sexuality, but because of my bodily experiences, my politics, the way I navigate the world. Like, there's more to it than just who I want to sleep with, but that's kind of where it starts. But I feel like that's also maybe an older point of view as well. Of course, yeah.
I think like the breaking down of the binary in the first place in comics is something that needs to happen severely and has been a long time coming, and that a lot of our conversations about gender and about sexuality in comics is sort of, I feel like a lot of us aren't on the same page in some ways when we have this conversation, because if we still are holding up the idea of the binary and we're like, for example, Wonder Woman, like, oh, well, we want her to be strong, so we want her to have a sword, we want her to cut people's heads off, you know. So why are we holding up this specific standard and which has been coded as male in comics? And like the point is that that binary itself is what is harming us and what is holding us back, and like it is causing us to have a lot of, you know, characters that are not living up to their potential.
That's a really good example of what I was talking about earlier about straight mechanics in comics. Like what, like how is it, like you're both pointing out, like that for a woman to be on the page, she has to be, you know, beating the shit out of people. Like you can't just like fucking hug. Like the only kind of conflict is hitting. Like it's and I think like certain things like parts of Gail Simone's Wonder Woman run really address some of those issues and address some different conflicts, like Wonder Woman's kind of like soul being stolen in a super interesting way. Her sense of goodness being stolen, like physically, did interesting things with that and kind of like made like brought magical elements to like a more psychological kind of conflict. Which I thought was neat, but yeah.
Thank you.
It seems to me like we're ready. Thank you so much. I love poster. If anyone wants to admit to being the oldest person here in the room, you get this poster. If you have whoever wants to be the youngest or completely the youngest, we have a smaller poster and absolutely free. And I think anyone who's wearing a fabulous costume, first come, first serve. If you want to get the rest of these others, it's just a little souvenir from tonight's event.